Boost my mind.
Hey, Bill.
Daniel, how are you?
It is day 3. I'm exhausted, Bill.
You're exhausted.
I am ready to go home and take a very long nap.
No, don't say that because I was thinking about this morning. It's like going to your kids' play, right? On the third night, they've got it nailed. And the third is always the best performance, and then it's over. And so this is it. This is the grand finale
Yeah,
of
but the
our.
benefit of that is there's a cast party. So I'm trying to figure out where the cast party is and who's going to get drunk on the rum punch and make a fool of themselves as we go. So, that could be a fun post-conference activity, Bill. Are you inviting us to your house?
Just look for the Swoonpies of Money flagpole on my lawn. You
There we
can't
go.
miss it with the balloons. So listen, I am a well-mannered person, and yesterday I think I really was not very well-mannered because we went 6 full minutes and we ignored our guests. And I tend to forget that this is video and I think I'm in podcast land and nobody can see. So Daniel, before I forget, introduce our special guest before I get started.
Okay, well, let them introduce themselves. I'm going to
Yes.
start with someone who was actually, to coin a phrase that we used already this week, in the room where it happened. And that is my good friend, Art Young, who is on the video below me as I'm looking at the Brady Bunch family squares. So, Art, why don't you introduce yourself to our SASPA family? You are not a SASPA resident, but you're a SASPA member at heart, I know. So,
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be invited to participate in this storied event this afternoon. And I am a SASFA adoptee, I like to think occasionally, and love being with you all. So, my name is Art Young. I work at the University of Arizona in beautiful Tucson, Arizona. I've been there just over 6 years, worked in aid almost 25. And yeah, I'm ready for some of that rum punch.
that sounds good. Okay, and also, by the way, we have someone who was not in the room where it happens, but she was in her own room, and that is our good friend Helen Faith. Helen, introduce yourself.
Sure, thanks. So I had the I don't know if it's the misfortune to text you and Katie and who else did I text this morning?
Yeah, Brad
Brad, that's
Barnett.
right. And saying, oh, it was so great to just finish listening to the podcast. It was so great. I so appreciate it. And Daniel, sorry, goes, hey, you want to join us? I'm like, I guess. So here I am. Helen Faith, if we're not familiar yet, I am at the University of Virginia. I've actually been there for only like a year and a half as the Associate Vice Provost for Enrollment and Student Financial Services. And I have been in aid, I have you beat, for almost 26 years. It'll be 26 next month. So pleased to be here.
I think that makes you both youngins because I've been doing this for 37 years, you young whippersnappers. Yeah,
Everything is relative.
that's exactly right.
I
That's
definitely don't feel like the young one in the room anymore.
Well, then, and I wasn't either, and that was proved yesterday because my song reference of choice was Everything's Up to Date in Kansas City, which was supposed to be ironic. But when I had to explain it, I was told that explaining your joke doesn't make your joke funnier.
Mm.
It makes it worse.
It makes it
And
worse.
so it does.
You
So
know, real friends are
Well,
honest.
real
that's right.
friends are honest. And to that point, everyone knows this. We try to rescue Daniel whenever we can. And so he's on an especially short lease because as I said, this is our third and final show, if you will, from our remote outside the building. And so Daniel alluded to this. Day one, it was Hamilton, room where it happened. Day two was I won't say obscure, but the Oklahoma beat, right? That we heard. So today, drumroll please, as suggested by Katie last night, we went to the expert. We went to Leanne Hussey. And so Leanne suggested, appropriately so, a couple of tunes from Les Mis, which are great. And I think it's perfect. And by the way, Swoon Pies and Money, it's not that we don't have a limited budget, but we have limited insurance. I could go rip off these tunes, and then Joan Bailey would get a cease and desist, probably a $50,000 fine if I actually took the tunes and played them, which we'll do someday just to test. But here it is. So from Les Mis, she suggested two tunes, and Daniel and Art and Helen, perhaps you'll see this. So two tunes are, and it really, I think, hits home. Do you hear the people sing? Now, do you remember the
Do
movie?
you hear the people
Not
sing the
allowed.
song
Not
of
allowed.
angry financial aid officers?
Right. Thank you, Daniel.
You're welcome.
That's right. And so that is a rebellious tune. I mean, really, it's energizing and so on. So from the rebellious standpoint, I get where Leanne was going. And was this a rebellious week? Perhaps, perhaps not. I think the most rebellious thing I heard was Ben Monticello's suggestion that they crash the gates. Remember on day one?
Mm.
He said, just show up.
Yes.
Maybe you'll just
I
get
was
in.
tempted because I'm only a 2-hour train ride away.
That's
There
right.
we go. There
Did
we go.
anybody try to crash the gates and use counterfeit credentials?
I didn't see
did.
anyone, but
I
yep.
mean, I have
My
about 50
credentials,
conference badges in my
yeah,
office I could just take.
my credentials were squarely in my pocket, and nobody stopped me. In fact, I saw a couple of people walk right past security without going through the metal detector. So risky,
Wow.
Watch out, FSA. I think we'll have double the crowd next year that
Scary.
was
That's
actually
right.
Double the crowd.
invited.
You heard it here first. Or perhaps they're at the wrong convention. They could have been at the Quilters show, right? And
Yeah.
they wandered in. They made the wrong turn.
I think it was the American Footwear Association is the one that I saw.
There we
Okay.
go.
But the second tune, which is, I believe, a bit more optimistic, is One Day More.
Hmm.
Aw.
And Daniel, you can hum that if you like.
One day more. There we go. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I
Anytime.
thought for sure Leanne would come up with some Dolly Parton.
But it was show tunes. But what I
Show
stand
tunes.
corrected,
You got
perhaps.
it.
We'll have a whole other segment with that. But seriously, that an optimistic point of view, and I'll turn this over to you guys in a second. I want to hear your comments. Brad really ended the episode yesterday with really a great perspective, very optimistic. We are a community. We come together. It's so great to be back together in person. There's that intangible. We all kind of coalesce, as I like to say, as a community, and reminding us that our colleagues at the department, they didn't ask for this, right? And they're doing the
Right.
best they possibly can. Great people. And so as we huddle together, and looking forward to, what is it, December, Daniel, that I heard? There's going to be another conference.
That's right.
So-
December of 2026. Location to be determined. And we're all voting for someplace sunny and warm, but December of 2026. So stay tuned.
TBD Village in California, right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
So
Well,
Bill,
with that, I will turn this over to you, Daniel, and why don't you guide our guests in the way that you normally do?
that sounds good. So let's go through today. By the way, just in case you're wondering, we have 17, now 19. See, Bill, you stop talking and immediately 2 people join in. We have 19 people watching the live feed. And we are up to about 400 views of the last couple of days, each episode. Each episode has about 400 views. So thank you for that. Thank you for the support. People here have been watching. I know people at home has been watching. I'm going to give a call out again to Christy, she says she is still watching from ETSU Quillen in Tennessee. It's been a long 72 hours for Christy, just watching nothing happening for at least 24 of them. But thank you for still watching. So day 3, a kind of lighter day, but no less important. And maybe we'll start with the fun beginning of today, which was the acting Chief Operating Officer of Federal Student Aid, the performance-based organization, Richard Lucas, who began with a dramatic entrance. He was standing on the second floor of the atrium where we were in the auditorium, and proceeded to make his way down the steps into the audience to introduce himself and get introductions from a couple of people he met along the way. I thought it was a fun sort of way to kick it off. I was wondering, Art, I don't know if you had this moment. He was by a banister. I was waiting for the Titanic moment, leaning over the edge. I didn't know if that was coming or what that was. Yeah.
It felt a little Romeo and Juliet to me. He was in the back of the room. People were and then gratefully he didn't fall down the stairs. So he was graceful. And then he proceeded to indicate that he didn't know many people in the room, but he had a roving microphone, and that was all about to change. And folks who were in the room where it happened immediately got a little nervous. that they were going to be put on the spot by Richard Lucas. He only grabbed a couple of folks, but kudos to him, brownie points for actually engaging with a few aid administrators in the room.
Yeah, no, it was great. He asked us all to say how he talked about loving the job and how many of us really love the job we do, even though we know it has challenges and there are moments of stress, but I would say almost every hand went up. He laughed about the fact that not every hand went up, but he asked those of us who had our hands up to keep our hands up, and he picked a couple of people just to introduce himself, and it was really great. I've heard Richard speak before. He speaks from the heart. I really appreciate his leadership and his guidance. There were two quotes that I wrote down that I valued. One is he was talking about how talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. I've heard him say that before. The concept that really it's up to us as aid officers to help provide that opportunity and for our fellow student aid partners to assist in that. There was once again a real expression of gratitude to us for the work we do. And a real sense of partnership. I felt that from Richard. I'll say over the 3 days, that has really been the unifying theme. There have been moments of difficulty, but really, to me, the unifying theme has been the partnership that we feel, all of us working toward that common goal. And he did call out three things that would be under his direction. One is forward focus, really looking toward the future, recognizing the mistakes of the past, learning from them, but not necessarily spending tons of time really focused on the mistakes. It's really about how do we move toward a forward focus? And his quote, how do we live in an era of bold accountability? Which I thought was an interesting combination and expression. Harken back to Nicholas Kent's comments yesterday, and then relentless service was his third. So again, I appreciated his vision and his ideas of where we're moving. Anything Art you wanted to add to this morning? I mean, it was again his personal story.
Yeah, I appreciated his personal story. I've heard it before about where he began as a typist. I believe the story about taking the typing test and having to take it multiple times and having someone actually stay late to give him extra tips and time, that resonated with me. And then, of course, the fact that he wasn't sure that he was going to attend a higher education institution, and his grandfather left some money for the grandchildren, and without fanfare or bravado, his course of his life changed because of that decision, and that kind of gave me goosebumps. The other piece that I really appreciated about his comments was this notion of back to basics. Gosh, we would all love to go back to basics and reduce some of this complexity and layers. And as you alluded to at the top of the broadcast, Daniel, I'm reminded that our partners at FSA did not ask for any of this, and that even if sometimes the operational impact is not what was intended by Congress or perhaps not anticipated or foreseen, I really did get a sense of his heart being in the right place. At one point, he made a comment about rushed implementation being unacceptable, and I take that at face value, even though I think that it is overwhelming, and we all recognize that there are some time frames and challenges that are less than ideal with the calendar and the way that some of these changes are rolling out. But I do appreciate his vision, his commitment to connect with the community and to move us forward with an eye on student experience.
Yeah. Now, Helen, I know you weren't in the room, but I know you've also heard Richard speak before.
Mhm.
Anything you'd like to add about sort of his perspective and his role? And I know in your role as former NASFA chair, right, the role of the acting or the COO is a really important partnership role. And I wonder if there's anything you'd like to add to the conversation.
Hmm. It's an interesting question. I mean, I did meet him briefly when we were at NASFA Leadership. I was the one person he called on in the room because I think Melanie had said, "Hey, you can ask her to stand up. It'll be okay." Then I quickly flubbed how to say Virginia. I don't know why, but I did. He seemed like a really kind and pleasant and straightforward person. I appreciated the words that he had to say. It's really interesting, Daniel, though, because when you mentioned that what you had taken note of, that first thing, which was that I think the way you phrased it was talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. I had actually written down almost those exact same words when I was at NASFA Leadership, but those words came out of Art Coleman's mouth.
Interesting.
Yeah, he
Interesting.
said, as I recall, talent is universal, but opportunity is not. I
Interesting.
think those were the words. So maybe not a totally uncommon sentiment, but really helpful. And I think it's a really good sort of a touchstone for us, especially in the work that we do, that we really need to be there to extend that opportunity, especially as it's become more and more difficult. So I think, being in those sorts of roles, it's very tricky, right? It's really a matter of balancing a lot of different priorities, a lot of different constituents, ensuring that you show up as kind and as human and as professional at the same time. So I have a lot of respect for the challenges of being in that kind of a role. Now I have to stop for a second and bring my dog inside before my neighbors decide to call the cops on me because she just decided to just start barking her head off. So I'll be right back. I'm gonna mute
Nope.
myself.
No problem. No problem. So we then moved from that first session into a small break, and then after the break, right into the federal update. And this was Tammy Abernathy and David
Musser.
Musser, yes, who gave us the federal update this morning. And I will say, Tammy came up. Tammy started really by acknowledging that that she had given a lot of thought to a number of the issues, and she had some good news to share with us. But that she also really appreciated more and more how much the feedback is that we're giving, and that the department is taking it all very, very seriously and really rethinking and thinking about some of the ways they're implementing. So I will say for folks who weren't in the room or weren't able to attend, your opinions and your thoughts have been well represented. And this idea of having an in-person conference has really had an advocacy role as much as it has been a training opportunity, because it's been a chance for FSA to listen to us. And I think there was real value in that. So while I know a number of people were concerned about what would we learn, and there are still a lot of unanswered questions, the opportunity to have a voice in shaping the direction, I think, is really critical. So a couple of breaking news announcements. You may have seen these on Facebook. Lady FAFSA Down may have put it already in her summary today, and she did have one. And I do have a personal message from her that I'm going to read in a moment. But a couple of breaking announcements starting in April, at the latest April, it could be earlier. The feds are planning on hosting listening sessions on Fridays as webinars. So the community will be able to get together. This will be a regular Friday opportunity for folks to actually express opinions. Or there's the cat, Helen. Love the cat.
There's one of the cats.
There you go. Who is not camera shy. For us to express our opinions, our questions, and for them to listen and provide answers if they can and do research if they can't. So again, I really value that this is not a one-off opportunity. There will be opportunities to do that on an ongoing basis. Tammy did spend a lot of time giving a sort of recap of NEGREG and what NEGREG is and how NEGREG works. And if you don't know, it was a good recap, probably worth listening to the recording when it's posted. I know, Helen, you've been a negotiator. Art, you've been a negotiator too, right?
No, I have not.
You have not. Okay, I have served as a negotiator, so but you're familiar, very familiar, Art, with the process. So, did you wind up learning anything from the recap, or not? Not really.
I mean, it was a good review. I think any opportunity for our community to connect with the legislative process, the negotiated rulemaking process, the final rule, and how all of that comes out and translates into the sub-regulatory guidance that we all depend on so heavily, I think is good. I will just make an editorial comment, and that is that if the police actually do come to Helen's house, I think that might improve our ratings
It
and
might.
maybe our viewership. But
You can play the theme song from Cops
There we
yeah,
when
go.
that happens.
I would love to see that. I mean, not an arrest, but maybe a little drama and excitement.
Just a little
Consider
drama.
that done, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm going to include that.
Thank
Bad
you.
boys, bad
Hold on.
boys. What
Thank
you
you
gonna
for-
There it
do?
is.
Yeah, there you go.
Bill's gonna phone it in right now, so stay tuned, everyone. But I was a couple of things struck me. Much of the federal update was, of course, summary and review from things that we've heard about earlier this week or even before. Um, I think, as Daniel alluded to, I really appreciated kind of the conciliatory tone that was, and I don't mean for this to sound critical at all. I think it was a marked contrast from Wednesday's loan sessions. And as Helen mentioned, I have a great amount of respect for those folks who are put in a very difficult spot. But I think as some of the questions were coming and some of the different scenarios were being posed, I think there was a little bit of defensiveness at a few junctures, and I really appreciated the approach right out of the gate was this has settled with us. We recognize that it's not as simple as we thought it may have been or wanted it to be. We embraced the complexity with all of you, and of course, the announcement of the listening sessions, as well as kind of some humility and shared recognition that we're in this together. The other piece, and I don't remember if it was in the NEGREG portion of the federal update or perhaps a bit later on when David took over, but the other part that was just a little bit shocking to me and the folks that I was sitting by was to actually see the timeline of both all three, the AHEAD committee, the RISE committee, and then of course the accountability framework, all of which to kind of see that larger than life on the screen where they're anticipating the final rule for the RISE components and the AHEAD components to be late May, early June for a July 1 implementation, and the accountability framework to be potentially late June for a July 1 implementation, just was a bit sobering and a bit overwhelming. And I think that I think that's something that I am feeling a weight of responsibility to temper expectations, not only with leadership on my campus, but also with our staff to help them feel maybe less, I don't know if panic is the right word, but recognize that we can only do so much, and to temper some of those expectations and recognize that we're doing the best that we can and figuring it out together.
So I will say, Art, there were three pieces that Tammy said that I want to highlight that I think were clarifications of what was said earlier in the week. So I just want to speak these into the air. One of them was that she did give a grad plus example of proration. So get a copy of the slides when they're released. There was an example of a student who was full-time in the fall, part-time in the spring, graduate legacy borrower with grad plus. So that was important. That example was there for folks to review. That's one. Number two.
Sorry, before you go on to number two, can I jump in on number one?
Yeah.
And that is, I think that example was a starting point and left a lot of unanswered questions, including it appears, at least from that example and some of the conversations, that although we all recognize that graduate students and professional students were exempt from what we used to call loan proration, I assume we will continue to call loan proration as opposed to adjustments, this new piece, that we always start with full-time, full year. And then the next step was basically cut it in half, right? For the cost of attendance. And that's kind of a pseudo annual loan limit for Grad Plus because of what the gap is left for that student. That feels a little strange, I think, for a lot of us in the room, not only for Grad Plus, but also for unsub, because there have been times when we've been able to give the full annual loan amount, or at least what will fit in cost of attendance in one semester, right? And so
Yes.
that's an outstanding question. The other one is, I think it was clearly answered, at least in my mind, and I think Daniel, you asked this question at the National Leadership Conference. We need to really know what happens if a student drops or withdraws, or regardless of what point it is in the semester. It's been made very clear this week that it is based on completion of
Correct.
the credits, regardless of when they were dropped, whether the student is still being held responsible for tuition and fees, etc. But a lot of the folks who were around me were left wondering, okay, hold on. So if we start with a full year, cut it in half, and then prorate the annual loan limit based on the enrollment intensity, and then make sure it fits within the less than full-time cost of attendance, right? All of those layers. What if the student doesn't come back for spring
Yep.
and they drop to class fall? Heaven forbid we have to get money back at that point.
Well, right. I think it's pretty clear we don't. But what I did hear was and this was the second breaking news. It can be a school option. This was made clear today as well.
Yeah.
If you want to return money in fall,
Yes.
that a student doesn't earn. So to your example, let's say a student's enrolled at 12 credits, you disperse at the time of disbursement. They then drop 3 the next day. You could optionally, and this was not made clear before, so I was glad for the clarity. You could choose to return the portion of unearned loan at that point, so they don't suffer a reduction for spring.
Yeah.
And
And
so
the
that
opposite,
was
right?
yes.
The opposite as well. If
could
they
increase.
add credit,
Correct.
you could increase and then adjust later on when you're looking at the full year. So some unanswered questions and concerns, but I think we're getting more and more bits and pieces of those different possibilities around students' enrollment patterns and how we may choose or be required to respond.
Yeah, there was one other piece I wanted just to highlight, because one question that keeps on coming up is estimated time to completion. And so the example was given, let's say it's a 2-year graduate program, and at the end of 25, 26, the student is in the second year, but they're not complete. They need one more year. Has that student exhausted their legacy provision, or will they be granted? Because at the time, they still need one more year left. What is the reality? And so on Wednesday, the answer that was given by our loans presenter was they're done. And we've heard that answer a couple of times. This morning, what was said is they might not be done. They need to go back and look at the regs and do some study and figure out, because of this unique time where we're in this transition point, what was congressional intent? What does the statute say? What was the regulatory compromise in neg reg? And there may be some wiggle room. So the corollary on the undergraduate side would be you're entering year 5 of a 4-year degree. Is your parent able to borrow parent plus at the higher limit or not? We don't know. But Tammy did commit to getting us an answer and promise to get that out to all of us. So she said, hold me to that, and we will. So there will
was a
be
glimmer of hope. I agree. That was a glimmer of hope, because at least in my mind, that being exhausting because of legacy provisions, right? I
It
would
seems to
hope,
fly in the
and
face of why you even have legacy provisions, right?
Exactly. And I think the comment was even made, it feels like we're punishing students with rules that they didn't know existed
Exactly.
when they started their
Exactly
program.
right.
So
right. And Tammy's comment it wasn't congressional intent to not have people complete. So that was
glimmer of hope.
Yeah.
Hopeful about
Right.
that piece for sure.
That's really helpful to hear, because I will say that when I heard that on Swoonpies from day one, that was a shock to me. And I thought, have I not been paying enough attention? Because I had no idea that that would be an outcome. And I thought back to like the comments that I know NASFA made in response
Agreed.
to the proposed RISE rules. And they talked about congressional intent was clearly to provide a soft landing for folks, right? And to hold people harmless for the current, for the, for the fact that they have new rules that have just come into play. So I really, really hope to hear something different. Also, I mean, you're probably aware of the just vast number of comments that came in on those proposed rules. At one point
So
I checked and it was up to 126,000 plus,
that is right. Yes.
mostly in favor of being more generous, not less.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and the comment was made. Tammy did talk about their review process for comments. There are about 300 they haven't done initial review on at this point, but they will now start to collapse the ones that are writing campaigns or multiple
Yeah, I
signatures.
noticed that too because the number kept on changing, right? It went up
Yes.
and then it started to contract.
Yep. So they'll work on that next. Just to give a complete review, and a lot of it we don't have to cover because we already covered it. They did in the federal update this morning give an update on again the repayment plans, again the workforce or Pell for workforce eligible programs. They did a recap of the PSLF changes, which go into effect also July 1, 2026. This is about employers engaged in quote unquote substantially illegal purposes. So that process and how that's going to kick in. And there was some talk about the accountability metrics. That went by very fast. David was out of time. Just a flag on this one, which I'm worried about, and I will be submitting comments about this. I know, and it's not the department's fault. It's not, I mean, it is what it is. The department is only finding out income for people who they have a record for, and that is those who've borrowed or taken a Pell Grant. That means everyone who we admit into a program who doesn't need aid, and what do we know economically? Those who start not needing aid probably are going to end with a higher income. That
Absolutely.
income doesn't get measured in the average income of the program. But when we compare it to, and this was news to me, Art, I didn't realize there were 6 different earnings measures. So
Shocking. Yes, I agree.
I was like, wait, I thought there were only 2,
Yeah.
either those who never went to undergraduate or those who never went to graduate. But what we heard today is that on the undergraduate, you would either compare to those nationally or statewide who never went to undergraduate. But there is a same area of study on the graduate side, which I
Yes.
had never seen before. And so again, that was a little bit of a shock. I derailed, but again, the idea that you're going to include in your income statistics only those who borrowed or secured grant funding from Pell Grant, not those who never got aid.
Yeah.
So it's a tiny slice of your potential population compared to the whole population of the public.
Yeah. Agreed. One optimistic piece that maybe I just wasn't paying close enough attention previously, but that stood out to me from those slides were there was a chart that compared gainful employment with the new premium earnings premiums. And one of the things that stood out to me was that those who are not working will not be included where they were previously for gainful employment. And so I know that may not balance out entirely the issue that you've raised, but that was a good thing.
Agreed. And the 4 years after graduation or completion rather than 3 years, which again
Absolutely.
gives them a
Yes.
little more time in the workforce.
Yeah.
So again, this is all preliminary because we will get an NPRM at some point in April.
Yeah.
By the way, breaking news again, the NPRM for the Pell has dropped as of this morning. So it is in the draft Federal Register. You can read the whole 297 pages of the NPRM if you'd like to. I expect Bill will have a summary for us by Monday morning. So check out the podcast, right, Bill?
I have it right here, Daniel. I just printed it out.
There we go. So so that was the federal update this morning. They ran long. And that was really the substance of the morning. There were 2 other sessions I just want to talk about, and then one that frankly we're skipping. right now to do this recording, and not because it's not important, but because I've seen them at least twice in the last 2 months do the same session. But the last session before lunch was a foreign gifts reporting session. And again, the room kind of emptied out because there were a lot of institutions that do not have foreign gifts, or at least don't think they have foreign gifts. But what was your sense of this one, Art? What was your takeaway and your sense from the session?
Well, it's interesting because our institution, I'm not entirely sure how we got added to this beta testing group, but we were beta testers for the new submission portal. And I think there were 9 or 10 schools across the country. And so I had a little glimmer to some of these pieces. Of course, the presenters recognized that in many instances, our offices do not house the data or perhaps even the responsibility to collect and manage all of this twice a year. But recognizing our involvement by nature of our signature on the PPA, I thought I was encouraged by the desire for just the process to be more user-friendly, the desire to be able to provide access and edit ability some more folks across campus, whether that be your grants and contracts or other areas across campus, to share in that ownership. It sounds like making edits is going to be easier. They certainly clarified the intent, I think, of Congress and of this additional energy and resources in oversight. And I did appreciate a couple of times the reassurance that their intention is not to go after folks who are operating in good faith and trying their best to meet the requirements. But that there is an expectation that we'll do our best to be accurate in that and to share the responsibility and accountability across our institutions, and to do the best that we can moving forward. The other piece that made me just a little bit nervous was the clarification around gifts to a separate foundation as opposed to the institution. That seems to be very clearly considered as part of our reporting requirements. And so a few starred thoughts to take back and make sure that we're as compliant as we possibly can be.
I will say the other piece that I took away was the public transparency around this. So if you haven't gone to the website, it's foreignfundinghighered.com, .gov, something. I don't remember. But foreign funding higher ed, and you can on that website see public disclosure of all the schools who've reported. And I've looked to see where we are at the University of Miami in comparison to the big boys, and we're not a big boy, but trying to sort of get a sense of where we compare. But it was interesting. Our number one country of funding is Germany. I wouldn't have picked that out. But you can see sort of by your school who's providing the most funding to you, what the amounts are. So if you're, and there were only something like 589 schools, if I recall correctly, who have reported foreign gifts or funds. And remember, anything over 250,000, not individual gifts, but from an entity, has to be reported. And so I'm sure there will be more. They were talking about this is their largest amount of reporting ever. I agree, the process is much easier. Helen, on your campus, are you involved with this at all, or who handles it for you?
So fortunately, at my campus, this is handled by central finance. So of course we participate to the extent that we're the ones handling any gifts. And since we're in a student financial services model, the student finance, or what you might think of as a bursar side of the house, does, sometimes have things to, I think always has things to report there, but we don't have to be the ones managing the whole process. When I was at Wisconsin, my associate director for federal aid, was the person who had to do all of the pushing of the buttons. And I know it was incredibly ponderous and laborious. And his approach was to basically start this work after his children had gone to sleep and just work on it until he was done. And if that was 4 a.m. or 6 a.m, that's what it was, right? Because you can't be interrupted really, right? Or that in that process, it was just so difficult if you had to take a pause to get back into it.
So I found it. It is foreignfundinghighered.gov. That is the
.gov.
website. $72.1 billion disclosed for 559 institutions and 134,780 reports. Each gift is one report. And any guesses as to the single largest country? See if we can do a prize for the single largest country. Bill, it's not Estonia. I know you're all about Estonia because our first foreign podcast listener was from Estonia. So, any thoughts, Bill? Any guesses?
Well, then it's got to be Lithuania.
No. Art,
Scotland, for
Art,
sure.
any idea? Any idea, Art?
Well, the examples today were all about China, so I don't know.
China is number 2. You're
Okay.
close.
Oh, I would say Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia is number 4.
Oh,
India.
Germany is number 3. England and Canada 5 and 6, but the number 1 country is Qatar, which I think is really interesting, and that's I think really about foreign funding of students, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot in
Well,
the
that's why I
kingdom.
thought Saudi Arabia, because I know
Yeah.
that oftentimes we have a lot of students from Saudi Arabia.
Yep.
Daniel,
Yeah.
I think we have a whole new
China.
episode, our investigative reporting. We can do that.
I think so. We should. Sounds good. So that took us to lunch, a little abbreviated lunch, and then post lunch we came back into listening sessions. Art, did you manage to attend one or
I
no?
did not. I hustled back over here to get ready for the podcast.
Well, thank you. I'm actually still in the building. They don't let me out. But no, the listening session I went to, there were 2 options. There was a default prevention listening session, and there was a FAFSA listening session. So I went to the FAFSA listening session, and these were not recorded. So you will not pick up a copy of these. But the one I was at, run by Aaron Lemon-Strauss with a number of others in the team, really designed to elicit ideas from us about how to improve FAFSA, how to make it frictionless, how to get the word out to those who aren't filling out the FAFSA, and some really good ideas around the audience. So I'll give you one. Earlier in the week, it was shared with us what are the drop-off points where people, because there's still about 1 million people who start a FAFSA but never finish it, 1.7 million. So where is the drop-off point? And there are 3 main drop-off points. One is waiting for their contributor. So that's a whole area to explore. The second, and the one that was actually the second highest, was interestingly adding a college. So when you're asked to add a college, a lot of students just simply abandon the FAFSA at that point. And the third most was state of legal residence. Well, that's the first question they ask. So maybe you launch the FAFSA, you're not ready to start, you face the first question, you leave. So one idea that got popular support and traction was, is there a way for colleges to be told who started an application so we can help them finish it? And because right now the college selection happens so late in the process, could we move that up ahead earlier in the process and make that one of the first questions? Or could a student submit a FAFSA without even selecting a school?
Yeah.
Why is a school selection required? Could you do a transaction one without any school so that you could sort of get yourself ready and then add the school when you're ready to add the school? So some conversations around that, some conversations around how do we reach out to populations that typically haven't done a FAFSA before? Is there a way to reach them that is more than social media? Is there a partnership with schools and CBOs to get more folks into the FAFSA? So I thought, all in all, a really interesting opportunity. We then broke into different content areas. You could come and talk to folks about ideas. I gave an idea. I would love to see a calculator on federal student aid website that allows us to do the scheduled loan reductions. Give us a formal approved ED calculator that we could then actually enter the scenario into, and they would tell us what the scheduled loan reductions are, as opposed to us trying to figure it out on our own. But you could walk around and talk to folks through the room. So that was the other piece.
Nice.
And the session we're missing is the one that is being offered by the Office of Inspector General, talking about fraud and fraud cases and fraud prevention, reporting fraud, not identity fraud, but could be, but and not the FAFSA stuff, but really about aid fraud. And as I said, I've heard that session. They do a great job, but I've heard that session at another conference recently. So let me we're already about 45 minutes in. Let me turn to sort of our let's bring us close to the end. I'm curious, as we sort of think back over the week, and I'm going to ask this question of both of you. I'll start with you, Helen. As someone who wasn't here, how was the process of sort of getting the updates? How did you find the podcast in other ways, maybe financial aid follies, other ways to sort of build community? And are there suggestions you would give to us to think about, or to the department to think about ways to maybe provide more support to those who aren't able to attend live?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say, first of all, I'm so grateful that you decided to go out and do this because otherwise it just feels like a black hole, right? Like a black box maybe is more appropriate, like just this unknown as to what's happening in the room. And luckily I do have one person there, but of course, when you have a financial aid staff of close to 30 people, sending one person is woefully inadequate. Although again, really, really grateful that anybody is having a chance to go to an in-person conference that our colleagues at Ed are holding. So just it's been so valuable to be able to just get those recaps, those kind of breaking stories, the things that we really need to have our radar up for. For one thing, I think it helps with advocacy around some of these challenges that we're seeing, some of the things that have really sort of shocked the audience members, so that I can go straight to my federal relations person and say, hey, I think we might need to raise the flag, right? And so that we can make sure that we are reaching out to our colleagues at Ed as well to say, hey, we have some real concerns about this. It helps us to feel more prepared earlier. I know that one of the things that, sorry, now I'm going on a tangent, but, I recently wrote up comments with our federal relations person on the RISE proposed rules. And, my number one recommendation, because as this time gets closer and closer and we know really very little still, is the implementation timeline. It just really, really, really worries me. And I have to say, I don't think Congress meant for students to have to go through another crisis as they did with FAFSA simplification, right? And so that was a point that I made, when I was at NASFA leadership and making my Hill visits, that I really think we need to rethink this timeline. We really need congressional support to push Ed on this. When FAFSA simplification came out, Ed came out with a delayed phased implementation, and that's what I'm strongly urging, and I'm sure all of us are. So anyway, it just kind of gives us more fuel to be able to advocate appropriately. It's made me feel much more connected to what's happening. I have been, of course, reading Lady FAFSA Down's updates excitedly every day and taking screenshots and sending them to people who aren't on Facebook. And they've just been delightful and actually also very informative. And I have been trying to guess at who this person is. Bless you, whoever you are. We love you. So
Amen.
just thank you so much for helping to build that
A-
community in that sense of, I want to say thanks to Brad too yesterday for giving us that encouragement to keep on, hanging in there, and that we can do hard things and we're in this together, and ultimately we're here to serve students. So I'm just
So
really grateful to have so many wonderful colleagues doing great work.
on the Lady FAFSA down piece, we're going to announce breaking news today. It is not Art Young, so that is our breaking news. But Art, I will say, when yesterday I responded to Lady FAFSA Down's post saying I was still waiting for her response to my invitation. SASPA podcast is awaiting you, and the Spanish moss-covered magnolia trees need the mint julep of your sophistication. And her response was, "Dear esteemed Mr. Barkowitz, it's with great appreciation that I received your most kind invitation to join you upon your podcast stage. Few things flatter more than being summoned to contribute one's thoughts to a discussion of the most intriguing happenings at the FSA conference. Alas, the calendar, much like the social season itself, proves unforgiving of late. Regrettably, I must decline your gracious offer at this time, although I remain most grateful to have been considered. Yours most appreciatively, Lady FAFSA Down." So Art, who is it?
Well, although I can confirm that it's not me, I do have it on good authority this morning from an excellent anonymous source, that it is definitely someone on the western side of the United States.
Okay.
As hard to believe as that may be, because of all of the Southern belles who are tuning
Right.
in. This is someone on our side of the country, and we're very proud of them.
As a
Okay.
native
Daniel, I'd like
Californian,
to.
I'm not at all surprised.
Right.
Nope.
So, Daniel, breaking news.
Yes.
I know that person is listening,
Yes.
and this is an offer come in out of the cold. We will have you on the podcast, even on live feed. And just like the witness protection program, we will blur your
Oh,
face to modify your voice in that way. And that will completely shield your identity. But please come in, talk to us. You have friends.
You do. And we love you. And thank you again. If you haven't read the posts, they were tremendously informative, even with all the humor. They were both tremendously entertaining, but also tremendously informative. All I can say
Absolutely.
about our podcast is we are neither of the above, entertaining nor informative. So thank you again, Bill, for giving us the opportunity, to Art and to Helen. Thank you. Bill, any final words to take us home?
Sure. Just a couple, and I do have a thank yous list, but one final thought, and Art, you made me think of this a little while back. Um, Recently, I had an opportunity to interview Melanie Story, and she says something so significant at the leadership conference, and that is we're all human, and delivering hard news is hard. We all like to be liked. And so delivering messages from the stage, from the folks at the department, it's tough. And then thinking about how our colleagues have to deliver hard news to staff, to leadership, and so on. So I think from a degree of a bucket full of empathy, each one of us is going through that challenge. So I just want to thank you all for contributing. So Daniel, can I do the thank yous and we can get out underneath an hour, which is
Absolutely.
so the thank yous. The thank yous. First of all, thank you, Helen and Art, for joining us. And then obviously thank you earlier in the week. It seems like quite some time ago to Teresa Cowan and Ben Monticello, and last night with Katie and Brad. You're all now honorary Swoonies, which means you're going to get your Swoonie beadbag chair in the mail. Look out for that big package. But also the thank yous to those that are making this happen, as they say. And so behind the scenes, I can think about Alex Fuentes from College Aid Services, Spencer Morris from Belmont University. They stayed up late at nights helping me get this through, and so they're real heroes. Not to mention Caitlin Lambert, if none of you are you aware of Caitlin, she is the Electronic Services Chair here at SASFA. Fabulous. She put a lot of work into this. So thank you to all of those who made this happen, as they say. And also just big thank yous to Joan Bailey, the pie in the sky, who makes all this happen. And truly, I mean this. Thank you to you, Daniel. You are a force of nature. Where would we be without you? So you were really the impetus behind all this. So I thank you for dragging us along. I appreciate it very much. You're great. Thank you very much. And so we will get back on our normal irregular schedule next week. We'll probably start with the recap of the SASFA conference after we've figuratively and literally unpacked our bags. So
Thank you. Thank you, Bill, for being the consummate host, as you always are, and for having the germ of the idea that blossomed into the bacteria of podcasting. So it has been quite an infectious experience. So take that.
Does that make me a probiotic?
Here. Is this a SCOBY?
Yeah, exactly. But thank you. It's been a lot of fun, and again, I echo all of your appreciation. It's been an honor to be able to do this, and to those of you who are watching, we could not be doing it without your participation and your feedback. Keep on listening. We'll have more surprises, I know, in the coming months from Swoonpies and Money. Add us to your podcast feed, and make sure to send us email at saspapodcast@gmail.com. Love to hear what you'd like to hear. We are, as Bill likes to say, by members for members. So
actually, it's for members by members, but that's okay, Daniel.
Okay,
you are the unpaid intern cub reporter, so
that is my formal job title. That is correct. And for those who know, hooty hoo. So hooty hoo. Have a great one. Thank you all.